Hi guys, I am here with another true story for you. This one, the Bible verse before it is Hebrews chapter 1 verse 14, which says, "Are not the angels all ministering spirits sent out in the service of those who are to inherit salvation?" And this story is called Rsvp. All right. Sandra picked up her 6-month-old son, Andy, from daycare at 5 p.m. on Thursday in March. She noticed right away that he wasn't his typical perky self. His skin felt hot, and he coughed from deep within his chest. The congestion sounded horrible. Being a nurse's assistant, Sandra thought he might have an upper respiratory tract infection. Concerned, she strapped him in his car seat and headed home. Upon their arrival, she bathed him and put him in his crib for the night. She and her husband checked on him throughout the night, often wiping his runny nose. Thankfully, his symptoms never worsened. In the morning, Sandra readied herself for work and Andy for the daycare center. At 2 p.m., Sandra received a call from her husband that the daycare had called to inform him that Andy's temperature had shot up. Sandra met her husband at home to help take care of their baby. That night, with Andy's temp still high, they decided to take him to the emergency room. A quick diagnosis indicated that Andy had a virus, but he would be okay. Sandra and her husband breathed the proverbial sigh of relief. They took Andy home to recover. Early the next morning, Sandra entered the nursery to change Andy, who was wheezing and crowing, hoarse breathing sounds that indicate respiratory distress. Her husband called the doctor, who advised them to get Andy back to the emergency room where he would meet them. This time an X-ray of Andy's chest was taken. The doctor discovered that Andy suffered from a relatively new affliction, respiratory syncytial virus. The doctor immediately ordered transport to a nearby children's hospital, a larger facility better suited to treat patients with Andy's ailment. Andy was strapped to a gurney, with Sandra strapped in against him at his side. A non-rebreather mask used to increase oxygen intake was placed over his face. Sandra fought back tears as she watched and prayed for her baby. When settled into a semi-private room at the hospital, Andy was given fluids and more oxygen. His condition seemed to stabilize, but 2 hours later, around midnight, the alarm of his machine went off. Nurses ran in. One pushed Sandra aside to attend to Andy. Another nurse soon asked Sandra to step out. "He's very sick, and he has gone into respiratory arrest," the nurse said before giving Sandra directions to the waiting room. Sandra wandered down the hall, unsure of what might happen to her child. She and her husband alternated between sitting and pacing. They prayed, cried, and prayed some more. During a moment of sitting, a 10-year-old boy waiting with his grandfather walked up to Sandra and put his arm around her. "Oh, lady, don't cry. There are angels all around your baby. Your little boy is not going to die." His grandpa said, "Come here. You don't need to be over there bothering them." "Oh, he is no bother," Sandra said. Crying, she reached out and hugged the boy. "Thank you so much. Thank you so much." The boy, waiting for news about his ailing sister, then hugged Sandra's husband. "Everything is going to be okay," he said. Then he smiled and walked back and sat in the seat next to his grandfather. After perhaps the loneliest 30 minutes of Sandra's life, Dr. James entered the waiting room. Sandra and her husband braced themselves for the news. Smiling, he sat next to Sandra and her husband. A miracle has happened. Everything is going to be okay, he said. Your son is going to be okay. You can come back in the room and hold your baby. Now? Sandra asked. Yes, now. Sandra and her husband followed the doctor back to Andy's room. Sandra leaned over and held her son in the tiny bed, crying, "Thank you, God." Then to the doctor she said, if you weren't a believer, this would change your whole outlook. It would make you a believer in God. Obviously, there is a God in heaven, Dr. James said as he turned to walk out of the room. At the time, many children died within 24 hours of respiratory syncytial syndrome. Never heard of that. While sitting next to her son in the hospital bed, Sandra often thought of the words from the little boy in the waiting room. "Lady, don't cry. There are angels all around your baby. Your little boy is not going to die." And then she'd cry and thank the Lord again for his healing power. Isn't that a blessing? Such a blessing. I think kids know, and I think kids see angels. I really do. I really do. What a sweet little boy. How sweet and kind he was at 10 years old. Wow. That's hard to find kids like that these days, isn't it? So sweet and kind. To go up and hug those people he didn't even know and tell them that. You can't get over that. How proud his grandpa must be of him, huh? Wow, that's really sweet. Good night, guys.